I'm going to keep this straightforward because what matters most is whether the Sherline NexGen vertical mill actually fits the shop you're building, not how glossy the marketing sounds. If you've ever stared at a countertop CNC or a used mill on eBay and wondered if it'll really let you turn a small batch of parts without turning your garage into a construction site, you're not alone. There's a real hesitation that comes with spending a few $1,000s on a machine that could end up gathering dust. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's set the stage. The Sherline NexGen is marketed as a metric-focused vertical mill, and it arrives as a package that includes the base, column, spindle, and the usual accessories you need to start cutting right away. It's the kind of setup you'd expect in a hobbyist's bench, not a full-scale production floor. The target audience is clearly people who already have a basic understanding of metalworking, someone who knows the difference between a drill press and a mill, who has a small workbench, and who is comfortable aligning accessories like a rotary table or a vise. If you're the sort of maker who spends weekends machining brackets for a go-kart, or a jeweler who needs to mill tiny metric parts for prototypes, this machine can be a solid match. The metric thread pitch options and the fine adjustment knobs make it easier to work in the scale you'll probably be using for those small parts. The package also includes a decent range of metric collets, so you won't have to hunt down separate tooling just to get started. On the flip side, if you're looking for a machine that can take on large aluminum plates or do production-level runs of hundreds of pieces, the NexGen isn't built for that. Its column height and travel limits are tuned for parts that fit comfortably on a bench top. Trying to force a bigger workpiece into the swing will quickly reveal the limits of the design. In other words, the mill is great for precision on a modest scale, but it's not a substitute for a heavy-duty CNC bridge mill. One practical strength that shows up once you have the mill out of the box is the ease of alignment. Sherline has refined the way the base and column lock together, and the tolerances are tight enough that you can get a repeatable 0 without spending an entire afternoon with a dial indicator. In everyday use, that translates to less time resetting and more time actually cutting. For hobbyists who are juggling a few projects at once, that small time saver adds up. Another advantage is the relatively low power draw. The spindle motor runs on standard household voltage, so you don't need a dedicated 220-volt line or a heavy-duty circuit breaker. That makes it possible to set the mill up in a garage or a small workshop without having to rewire anything. The motor's speed range is also well suited for the typical materials you'll be feeding it: soft aluminum, brass, and the occasional piece of steel that you're willing to take a slower pass on. Now, let's talk about the hidden trade-offs. Because the machine is designed to be compact and affordable, the rigidity isn't on the same level as a larger industrial mill. You'll notice a bit more chatter if you try to mill at high feed rates on harder material. The practical outcome is that you have to be a little more patient, dialing in slower feeds and lighter cuts to keep the surface finish clean. That isn't a deal breaker for most hobbyists, but it's something you have to accept if you're buying a benchtop mill. A second practical weakness is the limited spindle travel. The vertical travel is sufficient for most small parts, but if you need to drill deep holes, say, more than an inch or two, you'll quickly hit the limit. Some users solve this by swapping the workpiece orientation or by adding a custom extension, but those are extra steps that add complexity. In a shop where you're trying to keep the workflow smooth, that extra planning time can feel like a nuisance. So, who should actually buy the Sherline NexGen vertical mill? If you're a serious hobbyist who already owns a lathe or a drill press and you want to add a reliable, metric-friendly milling capability without committing to a full CNC system, this is a very reasonable choice. It's also a good fit for educational settings. Think a community college workshop or a makerspace where multiple people need access to a decent mill without it dominating the floor space. Who should pass on it? Anyone whose primary goal is high-volume production, anyone who needs to machine large parts, or anyone who expects the machine to replace a larger industrial setup. If you're still on the fence because you're hoping the mill will double as a CNC router with a simple add-on, you'll be disappointed. The NexGen is fundamentally a manual vertical mill, and while you can retrofit it with stepper drives, that's an additional project and cost.